Okay, are you ready to have some fun? What we're going to do today is I'm going to demonstrate with you. This is using really inexpensive craft paint that you can get from anywhere. Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Walmart has them, and you can get great prices on them. What was on my heart as I was getting ready to create this page and just to be thinking about this is just how, in Genesis 1, we see God speaking, and it was so. And you just see the power in that when God says something, it happens. You can bank on it. But in Genesis 2, especially when we see him creating man and creating woman, we are given privy to see that it was very much a hands-on event that took place. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can create, and you can create using things, you can create from a distance, but you can also create hands-on. So I thought it'd be kind of fun for us. This is in creating this page to be able to employ some different art techniques. So I have here this is like a bath sponge that I wasn't using anymore, so I just cut it up. This is a makeup sponge that you can get at Walmart really, really easily. And it's really fascinating to be able to use them. So I'm going to start out by creating my background page. I'm just going to pour just a little bit of purple here for the background. And I'm going to use the makeup sponge as I'm doing that. And I love how, as I do this, I'm just going to create an entire background covering my page right here. You can go different ways, and it's really fun. You can actually see how you can make you don't always have to have, it doesn't have to be a paintbrush that you paint with. But for me, this stands out because as I'm doing this, I am creating something, but it's not exactly hands-on. I'm using something else as I'm going through, and I'm creating this background to my entire page right here. So I'm going to go ahead and just put some right on there even. You can do that. You can either put it on like paper plates or wonderful palettes that you can do. And it's still creating. You're still very much in control when you're using a medium like a sponge as you're creating. There's still an element of, ooh, how much do I want? Do I want to pick up the extra paint as I'm doing it? And I have covered this entire page just using the sponge with purple background right there. So you can see the light overhead makes it a little hard to see when I'm doing radioing. But I've got that there. Oh, it looks like there's still a little white peeking out from the sides right here. So I'm going to go ahead and add that on. Now, I'm going to take some of this green, and for something that's just a little bit different, I'm going to let it come out. You can see I've been using this color. I got to get it out. Oh, there we go. And as that comes out, then I can use something different as I'm sitting there. And I can sit here and I can begin to dab with the sponge, and it gives a totally different effect to the page as I'm just dabbling with the sponge. So different ways of creating will create different kinds of backgrounds, and they begin to add some interest to the back of your page without going right there. So see, you can see now I used my sponge just to create a little bit of texture as I'm going onto the back of the page. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually, I don't know about with this one, I don't know if there's enough in there, but I could even just begin to spatter the paint just like this, spatter different paint on here. And again, that gives a whole different feeling. And then even if I was to get it to move down, to take it down, remember, this is not hands-on. I've not exactly touched it at all, but all of a sudden, we're starting to see there's texture instead of a plain blank page. Something interesting is beginning to happen on here. So I'm going to leave that for right now. because what I thought, you've got something using a medium, you're using just not even touching, but just dropping it on there to actually create the texture that you're going through. But there's a whole different way of creating. And what we're going to do for this, are you ready for this? Is we are going to create a salt dough. Now, when you want to create a salt dough, what you want to do is you can start actually with the salt. And I'm going to cut this down because I don't need a ton here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of salt and put that into here. Then I'm going to use a 1/2 cup of flour. So I'm going to put twice. This is a 1/4 cup measure. Put twice in there. And then I'm going to mix that up in there together. And I'm just using regular plain old flour here. Then I'm going to take and I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of water. Now with the water, you may want to not use quite the full amount until you see how much do you actually need. Depending on where the humidity is, you may need a little bit less if there's still humidity in the air. And oh, this is so fun because you get really messy. I've often joked if Dr. Seuss was to write a book about my life, it would be titled, Oh, the Messes You'll Make. So I'm sitting here and I'm molding this together. It's coming. I'm glad I used just a little bit less water in the ratio here. You can always add more flour if it ends up getting too wet. And as you do this, what you're going to do is you keep mixing it together, and then as soon as it starts coming together, what you want to do is then you want to take it and you want to knead it for 5 minutes, just pushing down as you're doing that. Now, you have 5 minutes here, so I've already done this in advance. Right over here, and it's amazing as you keep kneading it, you end up with this incredibly smooth and pliable dough. Now, what I was thinking about as I was going through, I love the word that's used for how God takes man from the dust of the earth and he forms him. That's actually an artistic term right there, that he's sitting there and he's making man. And it's very hands-on, very close, and very personal. When I was doing this for myself, it is amazing to sit there and to even meditate as a cross-reference on Psalm 139, just thinking about how God has formed you. He's knit you together in your mother's womb and made you in the exact way that he wants you to be created. It's also neat when you're creating this to kind of get a feel for it's a little different than just using an intermediary like a sponge or just splattering directly and what you're creating it just happens, but also being very, very hands-on. Now it's fun because you can take the salt dough and oh my goodness, with your own hands, have a neat time creating your own little person. As you're sitting there, you can take what can really help. If you're going to put 2 different parts together, wet them and then connect them together. So I've got my head and I've got my body. But the amazing thing as we're sitting there and as we're doing that, to be thinking like with that torso, all that God formed inside your torso, everything that went in to actually creating you, the unique and the wonderful way that you are. And you can have so much fun just as you're creating this to be thinking about the care that he puts into hand fashioning each and every single person and putting this together. Now, my creation is not going to look anything like God's amazing creation of us as human beings. And I'm certainly not going to be creating all of the organs that go inside the torso either. But there's still something that's neat about when you can meditatively just be thinking on, reflecting on what God has done as he's uniquely hand-fashioned you. When you actually start trying to form something, it takes a little thought, a lot more thought than just flinging paint onto a page, right? And as it's sitting there, even as a simple creating legs and then just a simple torso and a head, there's a lot that's involved in creating a person, especially if you want the person to stick together and you want the person to have some personality. Now, the salt dough is really fun. I mean, you can have fun creating hair, creating nose, creating eyes, creating lips. You can just go all out as you're creating. This is an example of a way that you can just take art, and it's not about the art. It's not about what you end up sitting there and you end up making, but it is very, very much about considering the love that went in to hand fashioning you. You can see my little person right here. All right, we are not talking about, but is not going to win any People of the Year award. And yet it's interesting to think about, it took a lot more effort. This took a lot more time than just throwing a background on the back of that page. Well, especially because thankfully when God made me, he put a skeletal system. But anyways, you can just have fun with this. Thinking about, oh my goodness, God, I'm so glad you didn't just create the external, but you also were forming what was inside of me, knowing exactly what I would need, the strength that I would need to be able to do those good works you prepare in advance for me to do, but also the weaknesses so that I would keep seeing my need for you and depending on you. And so I'm going to stop here and pause for a moment because I want to have some more time playing, praying, processing as I'm having fun with my good little friend here. And we'll come back and finish this up in a minute.